Hello everyone. This is kind of sort of a continuation of the last video when I was talking about Hoover, FDR, the Great Depression, more than anything, the redefinition of the role of the government. And in this video, I want to compare the two most significant philosophies that have, drove the history of the US, which is going to be the Jeffersonian philosophy versus this new redefinition by FDR in the 1930s, right? So let's get started. Now, Jefferson's philosophy of government, what we call a very Jeffersonian philosophy, stems from the idea of, being afraid of the power being in the hands of a person or a group of people, right? So Jefferson believes in limited government, states' rights, individual rights, right? So I'm gonna focus on those three. There's a lot of other things, right? But those three are the most important to compare with FDR, right? So basically, historical context is gonna be very important, right? Because Jefferson comes from a time where, he comes from a monarchy, right? So he's the author of the Declaration of Independence. So I don't want to say paranoid, but sometimes being hyperbolic in these scenarios helps you understand their philosophies, right? So let's think about Jefferson about being paranoid of, having another monarchy, right? Or something resembling a monarchy. Okay, so for him, the best solution for this is limiting the power of the government. And how do you limit the power of the government? Basically, giving the power to the states and giving the power to the people. Because when I say government, I mean the federal government, right? He believes that, state governments, individual rights, as long as they held more power than the federal government, then they could avoid another type of kind of like monarchy or excessiveness of power by the national government, right? So again, Jefferson comes from a time when a monarchy existed, and for him, this is the best solution, right? So the first kind of sort of like 100 years of the American history, we have a very Jeffersonian philosophy, right? Of limiting the powers of the president, of having a lot of rights for the people, having a lot of power to the states, and a lot of like self-reliance, right? A lot of this idea of we don't need the government for anything, right? The way Jefferson envisioned it, the government that governs least governs best. All right. So the way Jefferson saw it, the least government, the better. All right. So again, this is, strange when you think about it because Jefferson and FDR are considered two of the best presidents in the history of the US. They both have shaped the philosophy and the vision for America within their own historical context, but their political philosophies are very much opposite to each other, right? So you would think like, why are they so different? Yet they're both considered two of the best presidents, right? And again, it all stems from this idea of historical context, right? They both exist in two different realities. And, for Jefferson, this just makes sense, all right? At the time, the best way to prevent the abuses of the government was by limiting as much as possible the power of the government, right? So if you want to understand Jefferson, you know, anything that will limit the power of the government, Jefferson would be in favor. Everything that would give more power to the people, individual rights, Jefferson would be on board with that. I know Jefferson is very contradictory because he believes some things and then he does others, but that is his vision, right? I don't want to meddle too much with the contradictions of Jefferson. That's a whole nother subject, but that is his political philosophy, right?
And so Jefferson's philosophy can also be summarized with this very famous quote from him. It says, "When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty." And this all stems from the same thing. Early on, the founding fathers had this philosophy of a deep distrust for the government. Again, it is a bit hyperbolic, but people were paranoid about governments becoming too powerful, and they always felt that we should always be like a watchdog against the government. We should always be sure that the government never had too much power, right? And again, these people lived in different times than we did, but this political philosophy is what drove the first 80 to 100 years of American history.
Now, on the other hand, you have FDR, all right? So historical context is very important, all right? FDR is a president that comes from the Great Depression, all right? at a time when, corporations had a lot of power. They rose to have more power than sometimes the government, or had enough power to corrupt the government. They were abusing the people. So in FDR's mind, when he has this idea of the New Deal, he's trying to redefine the role of the government, right? This idea of, we need a government that has more power, right? A government that has enough power to protect the people, right? So as opposed to Jefferson, that he wants to limit the power of the government, he wants to expand the power of the government for the benefit of the people. The problem is, how much can you trust the government, right? And FDR is really believing that the people should have, the faith, and put themselves in the hands of the government, and believe that the government is going to be there for the best of their interests, right? So, as opposed to Jefferson, FDR believes more in the idea that, limited government is not the solution. Because at the time of the Depression, it's going to be important to understand that you may need the government to lift the people out of poverty, to fix the economy, to do a lot of things, right? To have a little bit of a Hamiltonian vision of an energetic government that could do a lot of things. This is more into FDR's alley, right? The idea of, you need to have a government that influences, the life of the people, right? For the best. Okay, so you have two different philosophies, and again, the context is very important. It's not that FDR just wants to have power for the government because he wants to have more power. It's because he wants to do a lot of things. He believes that the government should be responsible for a lot of things, right? And the only way to accomplish this is to give more power to the government, right? And this is the solution of FDR.
And so this quote from FDR reflects the heart of his philosophy on the role of government. Okay, so he says true individual freedom cannot coexist without economic security and independence. People who are hungry and out of a job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. So FDR very much believes that the government must take an active role in ensuring a minimum standard of living for its citizens. Right? So he basically believes that economic justice is the foundation for political freedom. So this very much contrasts the idea of Jefferson, right? He believes that there cannot be, people who are in need in this country, and the government needs to be, taking an active role into helping out those people. And so this reflects a more modern approach for the time that FDR was living, right? During his time, there was a lot of poverty because of the Great Depression. There was a lot of people who were unemployed. There was a lot of people who were hungry, who lost their property. So this reflects a lot of the historical context of his time, but also, his political philosophy that is a little bit more with the times as opposed to what Jefferson believed. And so most of the criticism towards FDR's social programs to end poverty and unemployment and all these different things, and that eventually will also be expanded by LBJ, is that this social program costs money. And the money is basically coming from the taxes of the people, right? So it is not that the people themselves do not want to have social programs to help out the people. It is that people wonder, how much is it costing us to fund this all different social programs, right? So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated.
All right, so these are two very different philosophies, and this is in a way why FDR's New Deal is called a New Deal. All right, this is a reimagination of the social contract, and if you don't know what the social contract is, basically it is this idea that the government and the people have a contract, kind of like an unwritten rule about the government being there for the benefit of the people, right? Like the people will give the government power, but at the same time, the government is going to use that power for the benefit of the people, right? And in Jefferson's time, that basically meant that the government should be out of their businesses, right? That the people should be doing whatever they wanted, and it's not of the government's businesses, right? So in FDR's vision, it's kind of like, but it is kind of like the business of the government, right? It is kind of like the business of the government, this reimagination of a New Deal in which you're going to give more power to the government and you're going to put yourself in the hands of the government and trust that it's going to be the best for you. All right. So these are the two different philosophies. Why historical context is so important to understand both of them, but it is also understanding to know that you don't have to be full Jeffersonian or full, I've never heard FDR only, right? But being, on board with FDR, right? There can be something in the middle. The way I see it, I think Jefferson has a lot of merit for a lot of things, all right? Jefferson and this idea that we should care a lot about local government, care about what is happening near you because that's where your everyday life is going to happen, right? Those decisions are going to affect you the most, right? So for example, today we're way too worried about what's going to happen in the national level, right? The only elections that people care about are presidential elections, right? But in Jefferson's philosophy, what you should really care about are local, state, right? Because they control your day-to-day life, right? So that has a lot of merit, right? The idea of you should be more aware of your local government, right? But at the same time, you need a little bit of FDR's vision of like, at the same time, the national government should have enough power, all right? Because the Jeffersonian vision of hands-off government, the government shouldn't be interfering in the people's lives, people should be able to do whatever they want, it is not the same for corporate America as it developed in the early 1900s. It is a very different reality that Jefferson never got to see. And this is why, even though, presidents may have agreed with Jefferson in a lot of things, for this vision of, you can't let just the people do whatever they want, right? Because we have grown to be, so connected to each other. Corporations have grown to have so much power that you need someone to keep the corporations in control. And who else is going to do this if not the government, right? This is the opposite vision of Thomas Jefferson, right? So the criticism to it is also that it can foster government dependency, right? That you rely too much on the government and that the government has too much control of the lives of the people, right? That you need to think about it like this. When the government is a zero sum game, and this is something that I've talked in other videos, right? The power cannot be shared, right? Either every time the people give power to the government, the people are losing those powers, right? Those authorities, right? Whether you give it to the state, whether you give it to the national government, or you give it to the people, they rarely can be shared, all right? So it is a matter of finding the balance of where exactly do you draw the line between the powers of the national government, between the state, and between the powers of the people. And the main criticism towards the idea of FDR and the New Deal, and the second New Deal, is that it gave the government a little bit too much power to do things that maybe wasn't what the founding fathers envisioned. And it fostered some type of dependency of the people towards the government, and it kind of sort of undermined the self-reliance, right? But all right, guys, so this is too much political philosophical talk. This is all I have for you today. Let me know what you think. Where should the line be drawn between your Jeffersonian and your new modern vision for government? Let me know what you think. I'll be around. Okay, see y'all.